The Legend of Prester John. Nani ashasikia Prester John? Anyone? Acha niwaambie kuhusu Prester John. The Legend of Prester John ilianza around 1145 hapo AD, sindio, after the death of Christ. This was around 1000 years plus after Christianity imeanza. And what did that state? It stated that there was a gentleman by the name Prester John who was both a king, a priest, a monarch. Actually, I think jina priest, Prester, presbytery, kitu kama zimeenda ku-align ki-design. So this gentleman, who was both a king, a priest, and whatnot, he's believed to have ruled this land which was filled with opulence, wealth, and rivers that flowed with all kinds of stones. He was very wealthy and very kingly. Nanipata. So this legend was believed to have this guy who was living in India. Now what happened in this time? When the legend was continuing from 1100, I'll just spoil it, that the legend went on from 1100 to around 17th century. Nanipata. And I'll tell you how it ended. But before that, it has very high implications to the Christian history. So let's continue. It is believed that this Prester John ruled in India and whatnot. But by the time the 1400s inafika, maps zimeanza kudevelop kidogo. And guess what else is developing? The Muslim faith imeendelea kugrow, ikagrow. And as the maps develop, the people who are in Europe, because ni how wana propagate na wana believe in this legend of Prester John, wanasema, wait, in Asia, there's no gentleman by the name Prester John. There's no Christian society. So there cannot be a Christian kingdom. What do? They turn their eyes from India to Africa. Now, when you get to Africa, you know of a country which was one of the two countries that was never colonized, which was Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia had Christianity from the 4th century. There are a few reasons that propagated for the people in Europe to believe that the legend of Prester John was actually from Africa. One of it is that there were close historic ties with Ethiopia and Africa and Israel. How? Solomon and Bathsheba. The other thing, you can believe that the Christianity arrived there so much early, like in the 4th century. So I'm going to say, of course, because Christianity was here a long time ago, it may develop, it may grow in their sight. This means Prester John ametoka huko. Now, why is this guy very important? It's because of something that was happening right around the 1300s, 1200s huko. What was happening? The Holy War was being fought. Christians were saying to the Islams, you guys are not the ones, and Islams were saying to Christians, we also don't think that you guys are the ones. So they used to go through warfare, and this warfare by Christians was called the crusade. Actually, originally ilitoka huko crusade, the warfare za kupigana, sindio? And for them, the Muslims, they were calling it the Holy War. So now this Holy War ilifanya, but there was a time that let me not be certain with the dates, but there was a time that the Muslim society the Ottoman Empire had control over all of Jerusalem. Now, the legend of Prester John was important because it provided something for the Christians. And it's a little 4-letter word, H-O-P-E, hope. Iliwapatia hope. Kwa nini? The Muslims in that age and day had taken over Jerusalem, their spiritual heritage of the Christians. Unanipata? So they took over the Jerusalem that the Christians called home. And now Christians had to look for a place for hope. They also took away their very sense of spiritual, height, Jerusalem. So now they had to look for a distant land, a dual land that they had to create for themselves. And this thing really helped. Why? Back to Africa, you'll be able to discover that Ethiopia was one of the only Christians, actually it was the only Christian society surrounded by Muslims. So we'll be able to talk about how it was the only ones in that time. Of course, there's a Nubian Empire, the Nubian kingdom and other kingdoms that had become Christians. But by this time, Ethiopia peke yake ndo ilikuwa imebaki na Christians. Now they were surrounded by Muslims. There was a general, I forget his name, but I'll just consult his name right here with me. It is the gentleman was Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi. Of course, mnajua hiyo jina singekumbuka yote, si mnajua. So this gentleman declared jihad against Ethiopia, and he nearly destroyed the Ethiopian Christians. Amekuja huko amevuruga. However, there was another country where CR7 anatoka. In that day, Portugal. Ninakwambia Portugal walikuwa wazii. The Portuguese were just like, they were not playing with nobody. But there was a time the Portuguese ndo walikuwa wanasema in the whole of Europe. By that time, they have the legend of Prester John. They're believing in this faith. They're believing in everything crusade. Wakasema, these people cannot destroy the only place we call home. Prester John, meanwhile, is a legend. Don't forget this. Is a legend. Wanasema Prester John ako Ethiopia, their king ako huko. In fact, he's a descendant of one of the three Magi's. Imagine walijipika for a very long time. Akasema hawezi waangusha. They go there. What do they bring? Ammunition. Wameleta zile guns za mamaskatia. Wanaeka hivi nini bomb. Alafu inajaa kwanza kwa the whole script. Wanaeka bullet ingine. Hivyo. They brought that kind of ammunition. And a few other things. Let me be able to say. Now who talks like that? I forget. They're not here within my reach. But they bring ammunition, they bring tactics, they bring musketeers who are now the warriors. Wanaingia Peter. They bring warfare to these people who are declared jihad to the Ethiopian Christians. And warfare inabringiwa hapo, and they fight to the nail, and the Christian history and heritage is preserved thanks to the Portuguese, who have the clocks of those jihadists cleaned, like wanawavuruga viserious. And of course, that constitutes that now the Europeans will have alliances and treaties with Ethiopia, and then they continue to have treaties with Ethiopia so that they cannot be destroyed by every other jihadist that wants to come their way. Now, what is the intention of me bringing this story right now? It's not to throw shame or nini to everyone, because for your information, church history is littered with a lot of things we am proud of. I'm telling you, there are a lot of things I will say here that will not make us proud of church history, and there are some that will really, really, really make us proud. Kwanza nikianza kuongelea the crusades, mtasema like, guys, are we really these people? And yes, those were the people who represented us in those past times. Because of lack of good knowledge, they were being promised things which are not theologically accurate. Now nimesema the crusades were the Christians fighting against the Muslims. And what was the promise of the Christians? Waliambiwa, you will go to heaven if you fight these people and you die in the warfare. You will have purchased your salvation. They were being lied to by, the popes and whatnot. We'll be able to get into the detail of that. But today's story was about the legend of Prester John. If you have more to say and things to correct and more accuracy to fine-tune, kindly comment tu hapo na watu wa comment na adabu. Si ni kweli? Yes, I'm really looking forward to continuing this. See you on the next episode of Church History segment. What a guan. 8 minutes.